Hello everyone, this is Reza Durrani, Microsoft Business Applications MVP. In this video, we will explore flow trigger conditions. Trigger conditions allow you to conditionally trigger your flows based on specific scenarios. The advantages here is your flow only runs when required and you save API calls. What are API calls? If you go to aka.ms/service limits, and I will put this link in the description of this video as well. As a user who has a valid license related to the Power Platform, you have something called as request limits, and these request limits are a limit based on the number of API requests that you make within a 24-hour time span. So for example, if you have the standard Office licenses that include Power Apps and Power Automate, you have 2000 API requests per day. And what is an API request? Every step, every action, every query that you make, whether that query takes place in Power Apps or whether that query takes place in Power Automate, in a day, you have a limit, and that is called the request allocation limit, which is a 24-hour period for you to be within. Now, if you exceed this number consistently, then you will get a notification email that you need to buy additional licensing so you can increase your API request limit. If you've never checked out this API request limit, I highly recommend you to check this link out. I will put this link in the description of this video. So you need to be aware that you have a limited set of calls, again, depending upon your license. So you need to be extremely diligent in ensuring that you call your flows only and only when required. So let's look at a very simple example to begin with first. Out here in my SharePoint site, I have a list called tickets. And this enables users to go ahead and create tickets. It's a very simple list. This is just a standard out-of-the-box SharePoint list. And in this list, I also have attachments. So let's say I have a requirement right now that I need to trigger my flow only when there is an attachment associated with the ticket. Maybe that's my use case. In that scenario, what I would like to do is I need a flow to get triggered. Now, whenever we are designing scenarios like these, if we do not leverage trigger conditions, I will first show you how we go down that path. So I go to flow and I create an automated flow. And in this case, I'm going to use the trigger when an item is created in my SharePoint list. I have to pick the address of my SharePoint site. I have to pick the name of my list. And there are additional settings that I can look into, but in this scenario, I'm just going to keep it very simple. And traditionally, this is what we do. We trigger it whenever the item is created. Then we add a condition right here. And my condition says, does this item has any attachments? If this is equal to the expression true, that means has attachments is equal to true, then probably you want to go ahead and take certain actions. Now let's say in this case, I'm just going to add a very simple action, which is a data operation called compose. And if you've never tried what compose is, compose basically creates an arbitrary object on the fly for you in flow. So I will just go ahead and create an object here which says has attachment. That's it. That's all my flow is doing right now. Remember, the goal here is to understand trigger conditions. So I will go ahead and save this. This will go ahead and create a flow that gets triggered time the item is created. Then it will check to see if it has an attachment, and then it will post this message. So now if I head back to my tickets list, and let's say I create my first ticket, I'm going to call this IT request. I'm making a request to IT. Yes, and here's my sample description. I will not add an attachment. I will click on save, and I will go ahead and create a second one. And this time I'm going to say computer issue. I have an issue with my computer. I'm going to post this to IT as well. Sample description. And this time, let's say I go ahead and I upload some attachment to this, and I'm going to click on save. Now, once I go ahead and start creating items in this list, because my flow is set to get triggered whenever an item is created in this list, every time I create an item, and right now I went ahead and created 2 items in my SharePoint list, every time I create these items, it will trigger the flow. So I created 2 items and my flow gets triggered for the first item. And if we explore this, in this scenario, for the first item that I uploaded, I did not add any attachment. So if you look at my condition, the condition evaluates to false, right? If I look at my second flow, in this case, the condition evaluates to true, right? This item has an attachment. Now, in both of these cases that I just demoed, my flow runs every time an item gets created. But wasting, number one, your flow run, because my flow is getting triggered even when there is no attachment, as you saw, number one. Number two, I'm wasting a few API calls every time a file is added or an item is added in this list. If I have 10,000 items coming into my tickets list in a month, as an example, I am 9,000 times tickets are created without an attachment, my flow is still going to get triggered and I have 9,000 calls wasted, and maybe additional calls as well, depending upon how I design my flow. So if you want to save your flow runs, what you have to do is this. So as part of a new feature that has been released, and this is currently available only in a experimental setting. So what you need to do is go to settings and go to view all Power Automate settings and turn this on. Now please note, when you turn this feature on, this is a switch which is all or nothing. Because I have turned this feature on right now, all the experimental features related to Power Automate will be enabled just for me, because me as the logged in user has taken this decision. So I will go ahead and save this, and what this does is it gives you access to a new expression editor interface. So I've gone ahead and saved this, and the moment I did this, it will also go ahead and refresh my browser. What is different here is my expression editor. So right here in my compose statement, if I try and add the same expression right here, notice right here I have this new option called add an expression. So I will click on this and this will open the new expression dialog. Now, what is this new expression dialog? How does the old one look like? Let's compare it. So if I go back to my previous scenario and if I turn this switch off again, so if I click here, you get this box open up, and right here you have to go and type in your expressions. Now, the problem with this is, number one, the space for entering the expression is too less. Number three, it's not too intuitive. You have to click on the button to enable the expression. The old expression syntax is really clunky. My recommendation is to get used to the new expression syntax, and yes, you need to turn on the experimental feature, but I would recommend you to do that, at least to plug in your expressions, and then maybe turn it back off again. Alright, so what's the advantage of the new expression dialog? Well, number one, the new expression dialog, as you can see, allows you to plug in really long expressions. You've got a bigger space to play with. Second, the dynamic content is available right here, plus you can plug in your expressions right here, plus it has a link right here that takes you to the flow expression language, and this lists out all the functions that are available as part of the flow expression syntax. Now in my scenario, if you look at my use case, I have a condition that I defined that does this item have an attachment or not. So if I want to write an expression for this, I can use the dynamic content and just search for has attachments. So here's has attachments, and now I want to check to see if this equals true. So right here, I will write my expression, and my expression is equals. If I open the bracket, notice equals requires 2 objects. IntelliSense is guiding me through. So my first object in this case is going to be has attachments, and my second object is going to be true, because I'm checking to see if this value that is coming from my trigger is the first action in my flow, which is has attachments, does this equal to true or not. The beauty of this new expression syntax is the moment you click out, it will tell you if your expression is correct or not. So in my case, it's correct. And how do I know that it is correct or not? So let's say I purposely make a mistake and I click out. You notice it clearly tells me right here that there is some error. It turns red and it warns me right here. So I can go back and reevaluate my expression until my expression is good. Now all you have to do is go ahead and copy this expression, go back to your trigger and go to settings. And right here you have an option for trigger conditions. I will go ahead and plug that expression right here. Now when you plug your expressions in trigger conditions, you have to decorate them with the @ symbol. So please don't forget that. If you do not do that, and let's say I click on done and I try and save this flow, I will receive an error, right? It clearly tells me that the template condition expression is not a valid expression. And the reason is because when you are defining it in the trigger condition, you have to decorate it with the @ symbol. So I'm going to click on done. And this time I will go ahead and save my flow again. Or if I head back to SharePoint in my list, and if I go ahead and create 2 more tickets, I'm going to create IT request new. And I'm going to pick an IT request. I will not add an attachment and click on save. And I will go ahead and create another one, called this computer issue new. This time I will pick a category. I will upload another attachment right here. Click on save. Right. So again, I added 2 items. Previously, if you remember, my flow triggered 2 times. This time though, because I have plugged in this expression, my flow will only trigger once, and the flow will trigger for the ticket with the title computer issue new. And as you can see, my flow just triggered 1 second ago. I'm going to refresh once again to check to see if it has triggered again or not. It has not. Let's go and click on this, and let's go to my condition. You see the title is computer issue new. That means my flow only ran when I uploaded an item with an attachment. So if I put the attachments on the view right here, my item had an attachment, and because that's how I defined my trigger condition, my flow only ran once, and I have saved very crucial flow runs. And of course, I have also taken into account that I'm not wasting any API requests. Now in the next scenario, we are going to move ahead and go to a document library. And these scenarios, what I am going to walk through now, is purely based on a lot of questions that I receive that I observe on the community forums. So this time we're going to look at a use case wherein I want my flow to trigger only when a new folder is created in a document library. So that's my use case. Trigger the flow whenever a new folder is created in my document library in SharePoint. This time I will head back to my flow. So I'll go back to flows, and I will go ahead and create an automated flow again. And this one will run when a file. So there are 2 triggers. One is called when a file is created. This gives you the actual details of that file, but what I want is the properties associated with the file. So there is another trigger which is called when a file is created properties only. So in my case, I will go ahead and pick this. And there are various other triggers, by the way, when a file is created or modified in a folder, or when a file is created or modified versus when a file is created. So there are these different triggers. So be sure of which trigger you are selecting based on your use case. And I'm going to pick this trigger right now, which is the properties only. I want my flow to trigger, but I want it to only trigger if I create a folder. I will plug this to my site. My site is flow expressions. My library in this case is my documents library. You can go ahead and select a specific folder within your library or a subfolder, and then this will only run for that scenario. So that trigger action is available right here, as you can see. I will add the compose action. Why? Because I want to write that expression. I will go ahead and plug my expression. Remember, I want to only run this when a folder is created in my document library. Now, if you look at dynamic content, there is a property available right here, is folder. So I can check to see the item that is created in my document library is a folder or not. So this will tell me whether it's a folder or not. And exactly the same scenario, this returns a boolean to me. So right here, I will go ahead and once again use the equals function, and I will check to see if this is true or not. And that's my expression. And how do I know this expression is correct? Just click out, plug it right here, go back, copy this, head over to your condition, go to settings and plug this here. Remember to decorate with the @ symbol, hit done. So I'm going to go ahead and save this flow. Now if I head back to my document library, and this time let's say I go ahead and I upload a file, and then I go ahead and I create a new folder, sample. So all I've done right now is in my document library, I've created a folder and I've uploaded a file. Remember, I want my flow to only trigger when someone creates a folder in my document library. As you can see, my flow has run, and my flow has run only once, even though I uploaded a document in the document library. That means my flow is only running based on a peculiar condition that I have defined. And now just to make sure that it only ran when I created the folder, if I click on my flow, and if I look at the trigger action right here, remember the folder that I created had the name sample. So if you look at the properties associated with the file that got uploaded. The name is sample, and this is a folder. Now in this next scenario, I want to start my flow only when a document is uploaded with a peculiar content type, or when a list item is uploaded with a peculiar content type. Now if I go to new, you will notice I have all my content types stacked up right here. So I can upload a document and associate it with the content type. Perfect. Now the question is, how do I trigger my flow based on a specific content type? So I want to trigger the flow only when the content type is proposal. So how do I handle a scenario like this? Once again, if I head back to the same flow, and if I click on edit, maybe I can reuse this flow actually in this scenario. So right here, if I go back to my expression, we were checking the folder thing in the previous scenario. I'm going to remove this. This time I am going to check for content type name. There's something known as content type name, and this gives you exactly the name of the content type you're looking out for. So let's say in my scenario, I want to only trigger my flow when a document is created with content type proposal. All I have to do right here is in the equals object, the name will give me the name, which is a string. So I have to compare this with a string. So I will compare this with a string, and the string is proposal. That's it. I will go ahead and click out so to ensure that the expression is correct. And this time I will head back right here and go back to settings, and I will plug in my new expression. Make sure I have the @ symbol, of course. Click on done, and this now becomes a flow that triggers based on proposal content type only. Now if I head back to my document library, and let's say I create more scenarios, I create a folder, I call this sample folder 2, create a folder. Let's say I upload a few file, and this file, if you go to the details of the file, if you notice the content type is document, it is not proposal. But let's say I go ahead and I create a proposal based document right here. I picked proposal as my content type, sample proposal, and I will click on save. So this gets saved right here. If I close this, this will take me back here, and I should have my document right here. And if you look at the details right here, the content type shows up as proposal. Now if we head back to the flow, remember my flow only runs when a file is created. If you need this scenario for when a file is created or updated, you can pick the created or updated properties only trigger and recreate the same scenario there. Here my flow just ran once 49 seconds ago, and this would have only run for that content type called proposal, and the name of my file in this scenario was document. And if I look at the name of that, it's called document. Here's the file, document.docx. And if you look at my document library, that's the one that has the proposal content type. On the forums, I've seen a lot of questions around document sets, wherein folks ask a question, I want to trigger my flow only when a document set is created. Document sets at the end of the day is also a content type. So you can perform the same scenario there and just check for the name of your document set. So if my document set content type is proposal document set, then all you need to do is plug that text in there. So it works in both cases. Trigger my flow when a file is created in a subfolder. So first let's go ahead and create a scenario like that. So let me go ahead and delete all these files. Let me clear all of this up. And let's say I have a folder here called Africa, and I'm just creating regional based folders. And within Europe, let's say I have more folders. And let's say my use case is, okay, that I only want to trigger the flow when a file is created in a particular folder, or maybe in all my level 1 folders. That is only when files are created in Africa and Europe, or any other folder that is created in future in level 1, first layer, I want my flow to get triggered. I don't want my flow to get triggered in level 2, maybe that's my use case. So can I create triggers around these conditions? And the answer is yes. So I'm going to head back to my flow again, and we'll leverage the same flow again. So looking out for files being created in a specific folder, like let's say I'm only interested in files being created in Africa, then in that scenario, you don't need trigger conditions. As you can see right here, I have an option for folder. I can just go ahead and pick that folder. So I can go right here, pick my library, go back in, pick my library, click on this little blue arrow right here, and then let's say Africa, just click on Africa. So in this case, it will only trigger for Africa. Any file that gets added in Africa, anything, this flow will trigger. So if you have a scenario like that, it's directly available. You do not need a trigger condition. Just plug it right here. But let's say the use case is different. I want the flow to trigger when a file is created in any of the level 1 folder. So let's say I create another one right here called Asia, right? This gets created later on. Now in the flow, once again, heading over to expressions, once again, there is a property that is available, and this property is called folder path. Now the way this works is if any file is uploaded in the root of the document library, okay, the URL that gets generated for this is the library name /. Okay, so in my case, it will be documents /. If I have a file that's getting created in Africa, it will be documents /Africa/. That's how the folder path is returned. And if I head over to Europe and if I go to Spain, it will be documents /Europe/Spain. Put the folder path right in here. Okay, so this time it's just going to print the folder path, and let's go ahead and remove any conditions associated with this. So we have no trigger conditions. That means this flow is going to run every time a file is created. And this time I will go ahead back in my document library and I will start uploading files. I'm going to add one file at the root. I will add one file in level 1 folder, which is Europe. Okay, and I will also add one file in level 2 folder, which is Spain. Got it. I've uploaded 3 files. If I head back to my flow, all right, so as you can see 12 seconds ago, I have 3 times the flow being triggered. So let's look at the first one. The first time when it got triggered, I uploaded the file in the root. So if you look at the path of the item, which I added into the compose action, you will notice that the path is shared documents /. That's because if you look at my document library, the URL is shared documents, and I created this file img right here in the root of my document library. And just to prove my point, here's my file, right? So if you look at the path, it has 1/. Now, if you look at the second one, this is something that I created in the Europe folder, which is a level 1 folder. If you look at the path, it has 2 slashes. And if I look at the third file, in the scenario I uploaded into folder within Europe, it has 3 slashes associated with it. Now, when I use the split function, what split is going to do is it's going to go and split this text based on /. Okay, now because it ends with a /, after the / it's going to generate another element for me. So the way we're going to add our expression is this. If I want my flow to only run, okay, for level 1, this is my expression. I'm going to once again pick my folder path. Remember, I'm in the expression syntax. I'm going to split this by / to only run for files created in level 1. So what we need right now is to decorate this with the length function, and length returns the number of items in this array. So I got my string, I split it by /, so I get an array, and then I'm checking the length of this array. Now, as easy as this, if I set this to equals 2, if I set this to equals 2, that means I have 1/ in my folder path, and this is for level 1. So if I set this as my expression, now if I go ahead and I copy this, okay, and if I go to my settings right here, and if I plug this in, now my flow will only run when an item is created at level 1, that is at the highest level in my document library. If I wanted to trigger for the second layers, that is for Africa, Asia, Europe, you need to change this to 3. And if you want to go 1 level deeper, change this to 4. But you can leverage the path attribute and create these complex trigger conditions. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like this video. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.